can do it. Change, change. It's a sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do do do.
Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Spirit Cafe Show. I am your host, Barbara Schreiner Trudell, and I am, got my co-host off duty today. She's taking a little break, but we'll be back soon. And I have a special guest co-host today who I will introduce momentarily. In the meantime, get ready as we talk about how do you faith? Love that title. All right. Well, we're going to begin with the land acknowledgement like we always do to really raise awareness around the ideas of inclusion and reconciliation. This sacred land has held story for thousands of years, stories that live in the fabric of who we are as a nation. And we would like to acknowledge and thank the original caretakers and knowledge keepers of this territory, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and all other nations from where we are seated today. We give thanks to the nations recorded and unrecorded, acknowledged and unacknowledged, who also share the responsibility for this territory. We honor the Dish with One Spoon Treaty and our responsibility to peaceably share and care for the resources that surround us. We are honored to be meeting on this place that many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people have cared for across Turtle Island. We also acknowledge that as we continue to grow and expand on these lands, there is still unresolved and dangerous inequality and discrimination toward our BIPOC and 2S LGBTQ+ family. And by making these acknowledgements, we strive to be allies and take an active part in reconciliation. We recognize our oneness, we realize our history, and we choose to create a new reality. We are one. Well, my co-host today is the remarkable Marg Dupuis, and we're talking about faith today. Well, she was raised Roman Catholic, practiced all the rituals, no meat on Friday, nothing to eat before church, in the choir, taught by nuns, some kind, some not so much, went to confession. And her parents were devout, but they were also liberal. She stopped going to church in her 20s. Hypocrisy, gossip, heard people going to church on Saturday to get it over with. Doesn't sound like faith. And then she entered the Unity New Thought teaching 16 years ago. And she says she went in kicking and screaming. After about 3 services, she bought in. And in the midst of a severe depression, getting involved with Unity really, really helps. She served on the board of directors, chair for a while, and the Spirit in Action leadership team, and she co-facilitates spirit groups. Help me to welcome my remarkable co-host, Marg Dupuis. Marg, thank you for saying yes.
Thank you for inviting me, Barb.
Well, I'm so grateful you're here, and we are going to have a great spirited conversation today. How do you faith? Now, you're coming from the Catholic background. I'm coming from no background. So we definitely have different understandings of faith. And I think of this universe that we live in as kind of a divine mystery. How is it that you've gone from where you were to where you are? And how do you feel like you practice your faith now? What's what?
That's a big question.
Just a little, isn't it?
It is. First, let me say I called you Barb. It's Barbara. And I know
Yes,
that. And
thank you.
it fell out of my mouth. So sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
How do I practice faith? I'm going to say by showing up.
Oh, I like
By
that.
showing up and saying, for instance, yes,
Mm.
even in the discomfort of being where I am right now, I'm showing up. I have faith in myself through you, Barbara. So I find faith in everyday circumstances, not by the label itself, faith, but
Mhm.
by embracing everyday circumstances and the people who present in my life.
I love that because I think that's really all we can do. And really, that is faith. Life happens and I deal with it, and I know that I have whatever I need inside of me to have the strength to deal with it, to show up and do this crazy on air thing that you've said yes to. I think there's so many things that happen in our lives. And can we say yes? I've gotten in a habit lately of saying yes to pretty much everything.
Mm,
And, well, everything that feels good, right? Like I would never say yes, or lately in the past, I would say yes to everything and then hate that I did. Now I say now I say yes to all the things that I go, "Whoa, that's kind of, beyond my comfort zone, but it sounds kinda cool, so I'm gonna go for it." And I think that's having faith in our own ability to be present,
mhm, mhm,
which I really, really, for me, I just really like the idea of showing up as who we are, showing up real, even in the mess of things.
mhm, mhm.
Sometimes life is really messy. Do you think, as spiritual people, that it's necessary to attend a church or temple or mosque or ashram to consider ourselves spiritual? Is that needed to be a spiritual person?
Absolutely not.
Mhm.
Um, Unfortunately, I have respect and an awe for those who have a faith that is attached to, I'm going to go quote unquote, church,
Yeah,
temple, etc.
yeah.
It's
Religion.
the religion, yes.
Mhm.
And I really respect that. I have a block here when it becomes a should
Mm,
or something that is rote. I'm going to bless myself. I need to genuflect going in to the church. All of those rituals, I think, can have a feeling behind them, but when they become rote, I don't think it has anything to do with going to church. The faith that can the I can't think of what I'm trying to say here. I don't think it has anything to do with the heart.
right.
The actions that are rote don't have anything to do with the heart. So yes, being spiritual and walking into a church and doing all of those things, yes, and not doing
Yeah,
church. Does
yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, yes, and kind of thing. Because I know for me, when I remember as a little kid, I was in a regular public school because I was raised Protestant, but in there, we would say the Lord's Prayer in the morning. And it had no meaning to me whatsoever. It was what we had to get through to get class started, along with God Save the Queen and, whatever else we were doing. And so I was thinking about that a while ago because one of the things about unity teaching and CSL teaching is we will look at a metaphysical interpretation of some of these things. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, that's what that means? I had no idea. So we're saying words just because they're word, they don't mean anything. So what is the point of that? And I sometimes wonder, and I read somewhere this past week that does religion really have room for faith?
Mm.
And that really caused me some pause because, we think of, oh, a person goes to church, they're so devout, but that's not always the case.
Mhm.
There's a lot of shoulda, woulda, couldas. I have to dress a certain way, have to look a certain way. I can't eat before I go. Like there's a bunch of stuff that doesn't feel like anything to do with a deeply spiritual experience or a mystical experience, which for me has value.
Mhm.
But reciting something because somebody says you should doesn't really hold water for me.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think it's unfortunate because I'll step back a second, and when I hear that somebody is going to church, or if they're praying or whatever, I really have to step back and not put my guard up, because I think I can go into judgment mode,
Yeah.
and I think there can be really depth and a profound feeling for those who do
Mhm.
practice in a certain faith, religion, whatever. And so I just know that I need to stop my own judgment about on those who do find uh, their heart is fed in
Yeah.
tradition, because
Yeah.
it's both and.
I think that's a really important point because I think in New Thought sometimes, I've heard people occasionally go, well, New Thought is, a better route or whatever, it makes more sense, whatever. But I think it's definitely a personal perception. And I remember when I had a spiritual epiphany at 27 and had this like light bulb moment, to call it, I guess. And in that moment, knew God as love. So it's not something out in the sky passing blessings and judgment on us, but rather an energy of oneness that is very warm and positive and beautiful, and only is good, right? Like everything is. So then I was in a very traditional church when that happened because, my mother-in-law took me to a service and I thought I could endure an hour and it changed my life. So who knew? But what was interesting was when I was there, I couldn't I couldn't assimilate the message they were giving with the experience that I had,
Mm.
as my
Mm.
experience was one of pure light. I don't know how to describe it, but what they were talking about is only we can go to heaven, everybody else is going to hell. And I
Mm.
think we want to be careful about the judgment. Like you said, it's easy to judge that, well, these people believe this and that's ridiculous. Well, no, it's not. If they believe it, if they're living from that place, it's serving them, and it is a faithful thing. And I remember my husband's grandparents at the time, who were very devout, especially his nana was so devout. I loved her dearly. And I would watch her, and she's in that same church with people who are, a little hypocritical, living one way through the week and then pretending on Sunday. But she wasn't doing that. She
Mm.
was all in.
Mhm.
And it was beautiful to watch her because I couldn't really understand how she felt comfortable with the teaching. But at the same time, I had great reverence for her experience.
Mhm.
And when I walked away, I sort of felt like, "Oh, man, she'll be mad at me." But, I had to find a path that made sense for me. And I
Right.
think if we can just honor whatever the path is, each one of us, we like different food, we wear different clothes, we're not all the same in that regard. So honoring all of it, I think, is kind of a good thing to do.
I so agree. I so agree. As long as somebody doesn't try to make me make me them, it's all good. I want to know. I want to hear your story.
Yeah, yeah.
What makes you tick? What makes you believe? And yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's I'm with you on that one because I think coming to understand different faiths and different ways is really cool. I've done some interfaith type services, and I did one last year for World AIDS Day, and I spoke there, and my daughter sang there, and there was an indigenous presentation, a Jewish. Um, there was a Sikh, um, Hindu, so lots of different people. But what was funny is that the messages were all the same. And that's what stood out for me. The message was about love and inclusivity and respect and faith. And it was so remarkable to see this very diverse group and to hear what everyone was saying in their own way, but all of it came back to we are one.
Mm-hmm.
We're meant to be kind and respectful to one another, and it was really beautiful. And again, it just reminded me that whenever we go into judgment, that's coming from our own history. We're projecting our values onto somebody else, which of course is not really the best way to spend our time.
Yeah, yeah.
So what's your spiritual path like now? Like what things do you do that sort of feed your soul?
I have rich conversations with someone like Barbara. Um, for me, I observe.
Mhm.
I observe. I participate in the world. We have a dog, and we take his name is Wally. And my goodness, talk about a spiritual being. He is. And we have encounters with people on the street, and it's so amazing watching reactions, having interactions with strangers
Yeah.
and saying hello, and the smiles that come on people's faces. Somebody may look like they're having a bad day, or maybe they're Mr. Grumpy Pants or whatever. Saying a few kind words and watching the shift on somebody's face, for me, that's my religion. That's
Yeah.
my spirituality. That's, yeah.
It's
Um,
that connection, right?
that connection. Reading amazing books. Please don't ask me what I'm reading because I'm not going to be able to tell you the name. But I am reading an amazing book right now. Um, and yeah, spirit groups.
Oh, spirit groups are great.
I am so filled up co-facilitating spirit groups. We talk about so many different topics, interact with participants from all across Canada, across even throughout the States. It's a wonderful way to meet and share and talk and laugh.
And laugh, yes.
Mm.
I was part of your spirit group for a couple of rounds, and I have to say it was a very rich experience. What really stood out for me is the way that you managed the group, you and your co-facilitator, to really honor every person's place wherever they were. It was like there was no, this is right and that's wrong. Everything was everything had space to breathe,
Mm.
and everyone accepted as they are, where they are, that kind of thing. And I I know that prayer is something that you're not really, it's like, whatever. And I remember opening one time with prayer, and like you were okay with that. And I was really grateful because it's again, my way of being isn't everybody's way of being. It's just mine. And it was interesting to be able to do that and feel okay about it. rather than going, yeah, I don't really like that, so don't do it. Like you don't do any of those things. Whether
Mm,
you agree with the topic or the discussion, you let it all have room and space to breathe. And that to me is a very faithful thing, knowing that it's like you have faith that everything is going to unfold in such a remarkable way, and you allow it to do that.
mm.
So, yeah, your sharing wisdom group is, and I'm missing it right now because I'm so busy with other things. But I really appreciated the sessions that I spent with you, and I'm sure we'll be able to join some more down the road when
Mhm.
my time gets a little bit more balanced. But I think there's a richness in that when we can be a container
Mm.
for someone else to experience whatever they choose. And that's how you kind of do it. I like it.
I'm so glad that that was your experience in the group, Barbara. It was certainly our intent to have it be the group's group.
Yeah.
Lynn and I co-facilitate. We bring it together, but the group makes it happen.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I think if we did that in the world at large, we could probably end war.
Hmm.
Just make space for conflict, make space for disagreeing, make space for opinions,
Hmm.
uh, make space just for life, right? I think that would really make a big difference overall, is that everyone could just be where they are, who they are, if we just stayed in our own lane,
Hmm.
right? My perception of reality is mine, and it works for me. Doesn't mean you need to have it, right? It's like,
Hmm.
so I loved how that worked, and it was just really wonderful to be in a space like that, because not many spaces are.
Hmm.
And I see that even in spiritual places where there's, oh, did you see what so and so did, or did you hear what such and such said? And those type of conversations I'm not fond of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nor,
And I
nor am I. Hmm.
Yeah, and one of the things I did years ago, I guess because of having a child at an old age, I I was definitely a different kind of parent than I was with my first three. But what's interesting is looking at the school and the way the kids were being treated, or how they treated each other and stuff. And one of the challenges I've had over the years is the idea of bullying and the anti-bullying campaigns. And I'm like, okay, anti-bullying means somebody has to be bad and wrong. But what if we look at how do we create community? How do we create um, collaboration? How do we create all of this, acknowledging that whoever's bullying probably is being bullied somewhere? There's some pain there, and instead of making them bad, what if we chose to love them into wholeness? And so there's this whole thing about, like, for me, my faith is tied up in how can how can I show up as much as possible without judgment? How often can I just, regardless, check myself? If I'm judging somebody as bad and wrong, what is it in me that's connected to that? And am I willing to look at it and maybe shift that? So my faith is about kind of going deep in myself and taking it all apart and unpacking it, going, hmm,
Is that easy for you, Barbara?
no. Are you kidding? Self-reflection? Ouch. There's moments when it's easy. There's some easy stuff, but then there's other moments when it's yeah, it's painful. And to really look in the mirror and go, wow, I got some stuff under there that I need to move, and to be honest about that. I think we sometimes lie to ourselves because we want to be better than we think we are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm leading a class right now on Sundays based on Louise Hay's work called Life Loves You. And all of it is this inner kind of work about, can I believe that life loves me, um, and that everything that's around me is serving some kind of wonderful thing in me, and can I believe that I'm lovable?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of our faith as well, is coming to a place of accepting that who I am is enough for my journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one for me. When you said earlier something like it, I reached in and uh, the faith. I grabbed onto the faith, not your words, but mine,
Yeah.
in order to come here today. Well, I don't know that I would have called it faith. I just said, okay. Barbara said, and Cheryl said, I should do this. Get your butt in the chair and do it, Mark.
And ta-da! Here
And
you
ta-da!
are.
Yes, yes, and yes. If I do search inward, there had to be a component of faith that I
Yeah.
could, in fact, do this.
Yeah.
Yes.
And sometimes it's somebody outside of us who has faith in us that sort of makes it go, okay, I think I can do this. And I think, the idea that I should do it or I shouldn't do it, I always question that should word. If I get should in my craw, I go, that's a no. But sometimes it's just I'm afraid of the new thing. And so it's balancing out, am I in fear of doing something that really will be incredible, or is this a no? And I sometimes ask myself that question, because I want to always do what's moving me into a greater personal expression. So sometimes I'm doing stuff that feels really uncomfortable, but I know it's good for me. And maybe that's your experience coming here today. I don't know. Maybe.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yay. Well, we're gonna go to a commercial break right now, and then we'll be back. You're watching Spirit Cafe show with me, Barbara Jean, and with the wonderful Mark Dupuy. And we will be back in just a couple of minutes. You're watching the New Thought Media Network. We'll be back.
I was made in the image. I was made in the image of love. I was made in the image. I was made in the image of love. Here and now I can see I was made beautifully. I was made in the image. I was made in the image of love. Wish we'd all stop acting like we're strangers if we could see underneath. We are one family, and it don't matter where you come from. Every heart beats to the rhythm of one love. One love, one love. Every heart beats to the rhythm of one love. Every heart beats to the rhythm of one. What if we
Blessings, everybody. My name is Jafon Seeley. Could you imagine what is actually possible when we start honoring and recognizing our inherent worth, realizing that we are that which is assisting and co-creating our experience? And with that understanding, start recognizing that every human, every individual, everything that we interact with reflects that same inherent worth.
It's not about an adventure, it's about the atmosphere of the consciousness of adventure, the lifestyle of adventure. How many people would say that their lifestyle is adventurous?
My name is Lisa Benson. I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant and the author of Anchored in Bias, Fired Over White Tears. It's a book detailing my lived experiences with workplace bias and what fueled my passion for normalizing conversations about differences and creating safe spaces for everyone to bring the best version of themselves to life every day.
Welcome back, everyone. We're talking a little bit today about how do you faith? We all have our own personal practices and things that we do. And I know for me that part of what I do is journal. And I have been journaling for as long as I can remember. In fact, my 18-year-old said to me when we were moving, don't get rid of your journals because when you die, I want to read them all. So was that a little cringe over there, Mark? I just chuckled because I have a box of them and a few on my bookcase here and I thought, well, she might be really bored, but okay. Maybe not, I don't know, but anyway, she was like, don't get rid of them. I said, okay, fine. It's interesting because I do talk to people about journaling often, and I often get that kind of expression that you had for a moment there, where people don't want to journal because they're afraid somebody's going to read it. And I've always had the attitude is if you read my journal, you deserve what you get. Because it really is kind of a violation unless somebody's giving you permission. But journaling, meditation, I don't do prayer per se. I do spiritual mind treatment, which is quite different. You know, I'm not asking anybody for anything. I'm acknowledging that I am the I am presence and that I can create my life. So there's a difference there. I'm treating my mind to shift perspective. So I see it as a little bit different. But this journey that we're on, one of the things that really stands out for me is the idea of love, which in my mind means oneness. It's that connector. It's not necessarily about an emotion or something. And so I look at the things that I do and the way that I do it. Am I bringing love? Am I acknowledging oneness? And although I'm far from perfect at it, I think I'm getting better and better every day. So just kind of acknowledging that the person in front of me is some aspect of me, and how we interact is up to me. I have choice in whether I react to something or I just respond. What do you think your experience is of the idea of the word love? How does that resonate with you? Do you have a sense of it, or?
It's not an automatic, oh, love is anything else but the heart and the box of chocolates and whatever. So there's the the rote thing coming
The human.
out. sitting with it for a second, it's the exchange. It's the
Mm.
exchange between you and I right now, or like I said earlier, that person that's walking down the street. There's a gentleman that walks down the street. He does so 2 or 3 times a day. We don't know what his journey is. Very quiet, shy gentleman, and always walks with his head down. And now, when he sees that we're out and about, he just looks over and just waits for our hello.
Oh, I love that. I love
That's
that.
that's love.
Yes, it is. It
I
is.
believe that's love. Um, yeah, and love is comes in so many forms and in so many ways. You know, my grandchildren, my children, uh,
Yeah.
the dogs, the cats. Life is love
Yeah.
in
It
in
is.
all its icky.
Yeah, because there is a lot of that in there
There
too.
is, and I'm just being kind and not using potty mouth here.
Well, that's okay too, because, sometimes we have to be careful online with the words that we use, but I'm not always perfect at that. It's like I do what I can. Um, One of the things that I have, I remember when I was younger and I was living in fear and I was angry and I was just such a bee that, and B didn't stand for Barbara in that, you know. Um, but I was this really angry person before my spiritual epiphany, and I would not look people in the eye. I wouldn't say hi to strangers. I was really withdrawn. If somebody was nice to me, then I would be nice back. But if they weren't, I would avoid them out of fear. And so fear was kind of a driving force in my life. And what I've noticed now, and especially, it seems to just grow every year, is that I'm finding more and more joy in connecting. And so my daughter will get a little bit upset with me. We'll go walk the dog and I'll be talking to every single person, you know, hello, how are you today? Blah, blah. And just chatting as we walk along. She's like, do you have to say hello to everybody? I went, yeah, actually, I do. And one of the things that I said to her, I said, like, I look everyone in the eye, right? And she goes, well, aren't you worried, like some man will, I said, if I've looked him direct in the eye and said hello or whatever, he is less likely to see me as a potential victim because I don't have that stance or that energy, right? And she's like, I don't know if I'd be doing that. And I went, well, each to his own. But for me, it's like I want to know who's in front of me, who's around me. I want to connect. And I remember walking through a park one day with a girlfriend, and there was a gentleman sitting there reading a copy of The Godfather. And I went, whoa, good book. And he looked up and he went, yeah. He says, you believe it's been 50 years since it came out? And I went, yeah, I read it when it was first out in my teenage years. And he went, there's no way, you're not that old. And I went, oh, I love you. And my friend is kind of looking at me like there's this strange man and you're telling him that you love him. And, we had this beautiful exchange with smiles and laughter, and it just felt really good. And it's like stuff like that happens a lot. And I think it happens because I have enough faith in my own ability to trust that still small voice. There's, people call it intuition or whatever you want to call it. But if you get a bad feeling about something, trust it. And if you have a good feeling about something, trust it, right? It's like learning to listen to that. I think of it as the heart, but that part of us that knows. Like I think it has information ahead of our brain.
Mhm.
You know, it's paying attention to that. And so I feel comfortable telling strangers that I love them and connecting with people in a way that's deeper, maybe than I definitely would have in the past. In the past, I would have run. But it's that journey of just sort of changing perception a little bit, or maybe it's about coming to a place of liking myself enough that I can feel safe liking somebody else. Yeah.
But I haven't got to the place where I'm okay to say I love you to the guy that's walking across the street. And I'm going to throw out something that's a bit challenging here,
Oh,
Barbara.
good.
So you knew it was coming, didn't you?
I've been waiting for it.
So I'm that person too. I will say hello to people. I'll make a comment if somebody's sitting on their front porch and having a cookie. I'll say, "Oh, those look good. Do you have one for me?" Or
Yeah.
so Wen and I are walking Wally this one day, and there's a gentleman standing. This was across the street. He's standing there, cup of coffee in his hand, and out of my mouth, I say, "Have you got a coffee for me?" And so that we had a bit of a kibitz back and forth.
Yeah.
And that was just lovely. And out from the back of his house, this is the nasty part,
Yeah.
comes flying across the street his dog, who immediately has our dog's throat in its mouth.
Oh.
Thankfully, Wally was okay.
Yeah.
Wendy's knees didn't make out so good because she was able to grab hold of this dog. So where I go, and I still say hello to people. That hasn't stopped me from the interaction and the love that I feel for people out there. But when you're saying about the intuition and you act on and whatever, it's hard not to have that doubt, even though
Yes.
it's automatic for me to say hello to somebody and
Yeah.
say something to engage them in conversation. When something like that happens, it's very difficult to get beyond the fear.
Yeah, it is for sure. And thank you for sharing that, because that is a trauma. I mean, our pets are like our family. It's like a child. It's not, it's not just a dog, it's family, right? And I think that that type of situation, I've always been a little bit afraid of dogs. And so I'm not sure how I would have dealt with that. I don't think I would have been able to pull the other dog off because I would be terrified. I don't know. I have no idea what I would do. But yeah, when we look at life, I'd be curious to know if there was any uneasy feeling in you prior to that interaction. Like if there was, I remember seeing a show years ago. It's always stuck out in my mind. It was people who had been victimized in a variety of different ways. And what they talked about was a thought that crossed their mind right before the event or moments before. One woman walking home late at night and had the idea, well, I could just cut through the park. And then went, no, it's safer if I go this way, and end up brutally raped. Somebody else who can't remember all the stories, but all of them were like that. Somebody who was attacked, a knife attack. They went to go in their house. The door looked like it had been, jimmied somehow, and they went in anyway, even though they were like, well, maybe I should go to the neighbors and double check. Instead, they went in the house. They were stabbed, almost died. All of these weird experiences, but all of them had a little thought ahead of time that they ignored that would have prevented that from happening. And so I sometimes wonder if we get that intuition and it's not clear to us because we're not accustomed to listening to it. Right? Like I get curious about that. But yeah, that's that's a story that would really, I'd be watching for people's dogs big time, ready to scooch mine up and keep them, because my dog's really little. I think probably yours is a little dog too, isn't it?
No, Wally's 60 pounds.
Oh, you got a big dog. I had a 10-pound dog, so
Yeah.
big difference. But yeah, that idea of, what what is it that, where am I safe and where am I not? I think that for me has been, because I went through a lot of really horrible experiences as a teenager, as a young person, as a young adult, violent marriages. Like I just sort of rode the wave of crap for a long time. And I think now I'm at a place of life is pretty darn good, and it doesn't mean that there aren't obstacles. Last week was a terrible week for us, but it's like
Mhm.
even in that, it's still, there's so many blessings, there's so many good things, and life happens, right? Like we can't stop life from happening.
Mhm.
And it shows up in fully unexpected ways at all times. But what is, what do we know about ourselves as a result of it? Or what have we learned or discovered? Or, like, what would you do differently now walking down the street that you wouldn't have done prior to that experience? Can you think of anything?
No, I can't think of anything. It's happened twice now, and so it's really difficult to go for a walk and
Yeah.
not be looking out. Um, People, unfortunately, leave their dogs unleashed more times than I would
Wow.
prefer they do, and yeah, I don't know what I would do different. I know I can take the experience in general and either dwell on it
Yeah.
or I don't know, I guess see the gift in the fact that nobody, well, Wendy's knees were injured pretty bad, but um
But your
it could
dog
have
was okay. Yeah.
it could have been it could
Could have
have
been worse.
been worse.
Yeah.
Um
I wonder, I just had a horrible thought of what you could do, carry some pepper spray. That's going to stop a dog in its tracks, I'm sure.
yeah.
But if
But
it,
I feel for the dog,
of course,
you
yeah.
know. Wen
The
actually
owner
is
said,
now carrying a leash so that after this second attack,
yeah,
she thought if she had a leash, to secure the dog. And I know we're off on a different tangent here, but it, you
yeah.
know,
But it's still, we're dealing with life, and all of these things come up that, how do we deal with this experience that's real and traumatic and part of our journey here, right?
mhm, mhm. And still breathe and still say hello to the neighbors. And I'm still going to ask that person, another person, for a cookie if they have some or a cup of coffee,
Exactly.
because it just falls out of my mouth.
Yeah.
That's just who I am. That's how I faith.
And, I'm so glad to hear that, because sometimes when trauma happens, people just automatically close. And I'm really happy to hear that you haven't done that, because that really does speak to faith, that you're going to continue to be you. That, yeah, stuff happens sometimes, but that doesn't diminish you in any way. And whereabouts are you guys? Where do you live?
Kitchener.
Kitchener. And
Hmm.
people don't tie up their dogs or fence them in?
The majority do, but there are those who will walk their dogs with the leash in hand and the dog is free. And especially having these two incidents, it's made us leery. And so if somebody is walking with an unleashed dog and we
Mhm.
round the corner, then we certainly deke around another way. Or
Yeah,
I ran up on somebody's step the other day with Wally, and when stayed down
yeah.
in case the dog ventured towards us. And it's
Yeah, that's really unfortunate, because it takes some of the comfort out of the walk.
mhm,
But I'm glad to hear you're both still doing it, taking that dog out, because that's really important. I think, the journey, the journey that we're on between our spirituality and our humanity is something that, often we will struggle with, because as as spiritual beings, nothing can touch us in that regard. But as a human, there are so many things that can interrupt the quality of life that we have, and it can happen just in a moment, like a dog attack. That it takes us a little bit of time sometimes to restore our ability to live in that space of oneness and comfort when we've been traumatized in some way. But
Mhm.
I'm delighted to hear that you're still finding your way around that,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
that is faith, that somehow I can do this. I might take different precautions, but I can still do this. I can
Mhm.
still have a certain quality of life. I'm not going to let that take it away from me.
Right.
It's the
Yeah.
big myth, because I think sometimes people get hurt and then they give up on so much.
Yeah. And it's a challenge not to be angry as well.
Mm. Oh, I used to do that really well
Hmm.
years ago. I could get angry. Oh my gosh. But when you switch that and begin to uh, I think have space for other people. I think, like, have space for the idea that somebody makes a mistake,
Mhm.
rather than, like, because I know there was a while where I'd rather be right than happy. And in those days, everybody was wrong and bad and idiots or whatever. And I was the one who was, the angel or whatever.
Hmm.
Like, we have these weird things, but when after the spiritual epiphany that I had, it's like there was this experience of oneness, of love, of we're all part of something, and because we're all part of it, that means we're all connected. So how I think about life actually impacts all of it, and my hatred of it impacts all of it. So let me shift that, and all
Mm.
of a sudden we have a whole new experience, which is quite exciting.
So, do you know what triggered your epiphany?
I'm not exactly sure. My mother-in-law, who I was trying to please because I didn't think she liked me, so when she invited me to go to church one Sunday night, I went, "Oh, okay, I can endure an hour of church to get her to like me." So I went, and when I went into the church that night, it was a Nazarene church, and they had a video presentation of a woman talking about death and how best to support people grieving and things. I'm like, I don't know what that has to do with anything. And the way I can best describe it is when I walked into that church, I was in complete darkness. And when I came out, it's like somebody had just turned on all the lights, and I'm blinking to be able to make sense of what I was seeing. And I just had this knowing, and the feeling of it lasted for probably about 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that, just this oneness with this infinite whatever. And in that energy, it was an energy of love and acceptance and beauty and grace, and
Mm.
it was just incredible. And about 6 days after this experience, I was a very heavy smoker. I smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day. And a weekend, I'm going, I can't do that anymore. This is the temple of God. I don't have the right to kill it. And I stopped smoking. And when I butted out that cigarette, which was coming up to 40 years ago now, um, I never had a single craving,
Wow.
not a one. Like, I butted that cigarette out. I said to my friend, that's the last cigarette you see me smoke. Till the next one. There's never been a next one, and there's never been a craving. And
Wow.
It's and I tried to quit about 2 weeks earlier. Man, I made it for about 3 hours, and I was just horrible. It's in fact, when I told my husband at the time I was gonna quit smoking, he ran to the store and bought me cigarettes. So I had 1 more pack I needed to smoke before I could quit because I couldn't have them go to waste. Um, so I smoked that, and I said, "Don't you buy me any more." And it was like I'd never smoked. There was no desire
Yeah.
and no, like, it just was nothing. In fact, about 6 months later, a friend was driving me to work one day because my car was in the shop, and when he picked me up, he was smoking and he handed me a cigarette and I said, I don't smoke. And he goes, yeah, right. And he was holding the cigarette out to me and I went, I quit 6 months ago. He's going, there's no way you quit. And I went, I quit. He's like, how did I not know this?
Wow.
It just was. And that for me was also a really profound experience, but it was about, again, about faith in that when I bought into the idea that this is a temple and I don't get to destroy it, that
Mm,
just that belief was stronger than whatever had me smoking. So
mm,
yeah, fascinating. It was remarkable. And I don't know what it was, but that
wow.
topic of death, I guess the old me died and new
Mm,
life. I
mhm,
have no idea, but yeah, I think the real me emerged. It was like the fear is what died. I think that's what was dying away. And there was this part of me that did have light, that did have love, that, you know,
mm,
could emerge at that point. So yeah, it was interesting. But I only stayed in that church for about a year and a half because they were telling me that the rabbi's going to hell and people who've never heard of Jesus Christ are going to hell. And I'm like,
mm,
it doesn't feel right.
mhm.
And I found CSL after that, which was a great new beginning. And we're down to our last 3.5 minutes. So final thoughts. What one thing would you like to leave our viewers with? One final wise little nugget.
I feel very peaceful right now,
I love that.
and that is not rehearsed. That's how I am feeling right now, and
Mm.
very grateful to have been invited to join you today, Barbara.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm grateful to have you here. I enjoy our conversations, and I love that you just go wherever it goes, and you come up with wonderful, interesting ways of going yes and creating that. So I love that. Thank you. And my nugget would be that each one of us is created however we're created, and the best thing in the world we can do is love one another and that means to accept one another, accept our differences, our similarities, uh, accept the habits that we don't like. Just accept that everybody does it different, and that's okay.
Mhm.
It's all good. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm so glad that you said yes and participated, and we'll be back again next week where we have the wonderful guest, Reverend KC, will be with us. And they are the senior minister of Spirit Uncensored. So that's going to be a very interesting conversation, I think. So you don't want
Sounds
to miss.
interesting.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good. Rev KC is pretty remarkable. So thank you, Mark. I love you. I appreciate you. And I'm so glad you did this with me. Cheryl will be back real soon. She's got some family in town and having a wonderful time with them. So she'll be back soon. But in the meantime, be your beautiful self. Know that courageous conversations don't happen by accident, they happen on purpose. So take the time to say yes when somebody asks you a question you don't know how to answer, or you have a feeling you're not quite comfortable with. Allow yourself to go there and to find the light in all of it. Thank you for being here. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. You're watching Spirit Cafe Show on the New Thought Media Network. See you next week.
Bye.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.